Muy buenas, bienvenidos a este capítulo ultra mega super especial de Charlas desde Shadowland, en el cual vamos a entrevistar a una de esas eminencias, una de esas personas importantísimas del mundo del rol, como es James D'Amato. ¿Quién es este señor? Pues básicamente es el fundador de la red de podcast One Shot, en la cual hacen un montonazo de partidas y hay, bueno, hay una comunidad detrás impresionante, pero no solamente eso, él dirige sus propias partidas, tiene una campaña que se llama Skyjacks que lleva no sé cuánto tiempo, ha dirigido a las personas más importantes dentro de este mundillo y sobre todo ha escrito una serie de libros que son las guías definitivas, la guía definitiva de, la guía definitiva de, y ahora tenemos justo en preventa tres de estos libros. Abajo en la descripción del vídeo vais a poder encontrarlo. Si estáis escuchando esto en podcast, pues también. Y básicamente son tres los que tenemos ahora mismo en preventa en español. La guía definitiva de los juegos de rol, la guía definitiva de los trasfondos de rol y la guía definitiva de la creación de mundos de rol. Son libros súper ultra prácticos para que podáis construirlo. Y nos va a hablar James de este tipo de cosas. Hay que avisaros de una cosa muy importante y es que la entrevista está en inglés. Todo está en inglés. James tiene una dicción maravillosa, por lo tanto no vais a tener mucho problema para entenderle, pero si estáis escuchando esto en audio, os invito a que os paséis en YouTube porque ahí tenéis un botoncito que le dais y hace los subtítulos. Entonces eso siempre hace que la cosa sea más cómoda. Eh, en cualquier caso, es una delicia oírla hablar y merece muchísimo la pena poder estar este tiempo con él, descubrir un poco del por qué hace las cosas, cómo hace las cosas y que nos cuente un poquito más de su trastienda, de cómo construye todo estas cosas tan espectaculares y el por qué lo hizo, cómo empezó, etcétera. Y nada más, no quiero distraeros más, simplemente quiero que os metáis en la entrevista y ya está. Pero recordad, sadulaos.es, guía, guión definitiva, guión rol, entréis ahí y comprad todo, si no ya os digo que está abajo en la descripción. Venga, a pasarlo bien. So, hello, this is chat from Southlands. I don't know exactly how to say this in English because the podcast is called Charlas desde Southlands. But now we are talking English, so chats or talks from Southlands, I don't know. James, I'm very pleased to have you here because you're like, I don't know, like one of the most important persons in the. I don't.
That's an
It's okay.
exaggeration.
No, it's for me it's something real. It's like I don't know, it's a rock star or something like that. It's not important like a president, but is someone that I don't know how many people listen to your podcast or listen or watch your plays
I
more or
mean,
less.
gosh, hard to say. Like somewhere in the order of tens of thousands of folks have tuned in, and we've had millions of downloads over the years. But yeah, like certainly, there are a lot of people who are invested in the art that I create, and I appreciate that very much. It's very funny, I think. You only know your own perspective, right? So I see
Mhm.
plenty of people in the industry who are more noteworthy than me, who I feel like have accomplished more or are on larger stages.
Mhm.
Um, but you're right, that doesn't diminish the things that I've accomplished, and I'm really proud of all the cool things that I've got to do.
Mm. This numbers is very is crazy for the Spanish people because I don't know it's we are audiences significantly shorter. In for us is like wow 1,000 views. It's like it's a lot for us. So uh, for me, this kind of industry is very difficult to understand or to imagine even. I think it's the same for you because when you start the industry, the role playing industry in this particular environment was nearly non-existent, right?
Yeah, I started around 2013, and certainly the actual playfield was really in its infancy. There
Mm,
were still productions around. There were a bunch of YouTube channels that were playing Pathfinder's Rise of the Rune Lords campaign. But we were there before Critical Role started up. We were there before a lot of the big names sort of stepped onto the scene. And yeah, we've seen like a marvelous transformation. But like I think it's an interesting note that you point out that the Spanish language audience is like segmented off. Like
mm,
those numbers are not the same in this, and I think it like really highlights some of the interesting things that we start to see with play and design cultures as we go through translations.
mhm,
Because usually it's only the largest products or projects that like get to be translated. And from there, players are tinkering with them, designers are tinkering with them, and coming up with their own unique designs and developing their own unique design cultures.
mhm,
My first experience with this was actually getting to read a couple role playing games that were translated from Japanese.
mhm,
And they had received their translations of D&D like around the 80s, and made Sword World, which was like kind of the Japanese homegrown version of D&D. Like I would compare it to be like a Pathfinder to the Dungeons and Dragons at the time. Was
okay.
just like, let's take the same ideas and do our own thing. But from there, like hundreds of different games started to evolve with very different needs and very different areas of interest than what we see in kind of Western and English based role playing games. To the point when games actually finally got translated back into English, there were so many fascinating ideas that were like completely uncoupled from what we got to see just in English, which I think is cool and a strength. You might look at the pool of, oh, there are only so many Spanish speaking people who are interested in actual play, who are following these channels, interested in these discussions, or interested in design. But one of the cool things is you are really getting to take the ideas and bounce them in that smaller chamber to develop some really unique and cool things, which is one of the reasons that I'm so honored that I got the chance for some of my books to get translated
Mhm.
over and have some of those ideas flow into another language.
I'm the designer of the End of the World game series, and from the beginning, the French people want this book to be translated to French, but they can't do it because they can't translator from Spanish to French. They have to wait to the English translation of the game when the game who was originally published in Spanish was
Wow.
translated to English. Then they can do it. They couldn't do it. They want to do it, but they had the industry is so small that there is no one who could do that
Yeah, so
the
they're
translation from
forced to
Spanish.
work off of a
So
translation of a translation. That's
exactly. So it's
wild.
very difficult for us to come to another other country. We have to make like this medium step for to English, and it's a lot of publishing muscle to do that, and it's hard for the Spanish audience to do it. So it's fascinating for us watching you do this, and I want you I want to question you to. How was you started with the role playing industry and then started with the impro, or you are, or this was the other in the other sense?
Way around. It's a little like interesting because I did a lot of basic short form improv like in high school and a little in college, but I really started my formal improv training, certainly in long form and techniques around Chicago after I graduated.
Mhm.
And I discovered role playing games in college. I don't know that you could call like what I did in college related to the industry at all. I was certainly a fan of the
Yeah.
industry and doing games and whatnot. But really, I had gone through all of my training at Second City, learning those improv techniques and IO as well. Um, and sort of, I had like adapted those to my at-home gaming style and whatnot. But I didn't really step foot into formally doing things in the RPG industry until I had already gone through my training and I had already put that towards working in podcasts. I was
Mhm.
doing improv comedy podcasts and I was on a podcast network, and the network had knew that I played role-playing games, and
Mhm.
he had listened to a show that was coming out at the time called Nerd Poker, which was Brian Posen's actual play program, like really one of the really early on actual plays that was around in podcast form. And he was like, I like this show, I was wondering if you could do something like this for our network. And I eventually ended up developing One Shot, which was really my first foray into doing role-playing stuff professionally at all. And kind of from there, it is One Shot's whole mission was, we're going to feature as many different games and mechanics and what have you as possible. So that caused me to like read more books, discover more designers, which got me more and more entrenched in the RPG industry. But really, everything kind of sprung from podcasting, and my relationship with podcasting really started because I was trying to find a way to use the skills that I had learned in improv.
Mhm. So there was like this opportunity that was given to you, and then you start to considering professional game mastering. Of it was like, I want to be a professional game master, and you was looking for that opportunity.
No, it was like I wasn't really looking for that because I didn't conceive of that as a thing
Yes,
that someone
I
could really
understand.
do at the time. In fact, when the head of our network had come to me and said like, "Hey, I want you to develop a podcast about role-playing games where you play role-playing games on the show," I was like, I don't think you can do that, because one of the things that I think is very special about role playing is that it is an experience shared amongst the people at the table. To really get an idea of what role playing is, you kind of also have to be playing. So I thought, if you record something so it's strictly observed, something's really going to be lost from that experience. But I had also remembered that during college, I would sit and sometimes watch role playing games in our club from groups of people and games that I wasn't playing in, and I did find that entertaining. So I ended up developing it. And I will say, like, actual play is different than being at the table, but it really can give you an idea of how certain games play, and give some people like a sense of what games are like. And I do think there's a lot of value in that. And that sort of eventually developed into me having an opportunity to create a professional endeavor out of it. Like the podcast grew and got enough support from listeners that I was able to take what we were doing and make it into a job. Which was exciting and very cool. And, you know, I even 5 years after that, all of a sudden, like being a professional game master uh became a possible thing on a couple different tracks, because like you could do the actual play thing that I was doing, or you could go to like an organization like Start Playing and start offering your services professionally as a game master, which is really cool.
Mm. In Spanish, there is like there is. I think that that's the same in English, but in Spain is very often when you are offering yourself as a professional game master in the net, in I don't know, Twitter or whatever. Um, there's a certain people that they start questioning it, like
Mm,
what
yes.
that's not that shouldn't be. It's like this should be legal, illegal. I don't know. It's like it's immoral.
I definitely have encountered people making that argument before, like not even just about people offering professional GMing services, but like also for actual play and whatnot. And I do think, you know, role playing is a hobby. A lot of people see it as like a personalized hobby thing. And there is some idea of purity that like springs up around
Mhm,
things that we do for fun. And I can see how some people want to hold those lines more rigidly, but like there's a certain practicality of how many times have you been in a game that has fallen apart because the person running the game, their schedule just got too complicated, it didn't work out, and you weren't able to do it? I know with a lot of these professional GMing services, some people are paid to be there. You know, you
mhm.
can continue playing your game because it becomes a professional engagement that helps people prioritize it. Helps people make sure that they are there to run it, and there really is value in that, especially, you know, now as an adult. I'm in my mid 30s. I have a kid. Like, uh, thankfully, I get to do this professionally. But if I didn't and was really missing role playing, having the stability of like hiring someone, like that's actually a great option that I'm glad that it exists. I don't think it should be what everyone does all the time, but I'm glad that it exists for some people somewhere. And the other thing that I'll say, at least on the actual play side of it, is I think my career has demonstrated that there's a lot of value in actual play, in being able to reach new people and new players, giving people a new entry point into role playing games.
Yes,
Because, you know, back when I started, the only way was having somebody convince you to sit down for 4 hours and
yes.
try something that you've never heard of before. And that's a pretty tough sell for most people.
Yes,
So
yes.
being able to listen to like an hour long episode of something, or watch a YouTube video on your own time while you're doing the dishes or whatever, that's an easier entry point. And I think it has absolutely resulted in more players, which
Mhm.
is good for everyone.
Maybe not good. I agree with you, but it's maybe it's not new players, but it's a new groups of people enjoying
Yeah.
the tabletop role playing games, and that's amazing for me. It's like I couldn't imagine it when I was a kid and I was playing role playing games. This area, this opportunity, this industry is like this is science fiction, and
Yeah.
it's amazing that it could be people like you that is supporting actively, and I don't know it is the correct word of saying fighting for it, but I I think I think it is the right question, yeah, the
Yeah.
right word.
I definitely see a lot of it as advocating for it, because like an important thing to think about is like these games are all deeply, deeply important to me. Like there's a reason that I've made it such a center point for my life, right? Like I have invested so many hours and so many years into showing off games, into learning about them, into helping other people see the value in them. And part of it is because I only discovered role playing in college. And I know when
Yes.
I was younger, I would have also benefited from this. I see this as my favorite form of creative outlet. You know, I like playing role playing games as self expression and art, more than kind of any other art form. And I could have discovered that sooner in life if it
Yeah.
was easier to find these games. And so I believe very strongly in the value of letting people know that this type of entertainment is out there. It's something that they can do, that's not that hard to get involved in. And the lower those barriers get, the more I see people benefiting from it, whether it is simply having fun or it is finding like transformative, like artistic experiences, emotional experiences, things that, we all know games can provide these benefits because we've had such wonderful experiences with them.
Yeah. So, how was the next step? Like, okay, now I'm a professional game master, and now I'm writing a book. It's like there was some intermediate steps, or this was like I want this, I want to do this, or how was that?
Again, this wasn't me deciding I wanted to do something. I had, at that point in my career, very recently gone full time doing one shot. I had done my budget with like the money that I was making based on the podcasts. And I was like, okay, in order to have a kind of stable income, I need to do this and also somehow make an extra $10,000 a year on top of whatever else I'm doing. And so I'd like run a Kickstarter for a big actual play project called the Dungeon Dome. And a big part of that was it would pay me $10,000. So I'd be able to do that first year. And as I was coming up on the end of that first year, a publisher reached out to me. My editor at Adams Media, which is the uh, imprint of Simon and Schuster that published my books, was like,
Hmm.
we're working on this book concept around role playing, where we want 100 different exercises or things for people to do to help add to their characters' backstories. And when she originally pitched the project, I thought she was pitching an anthology and that she wanted me to be a contributor. Like, we want you to come up with like a couple different exercises for this book and maybe help us find other contributors. And I was like, oh yeah, I'm totally on board for that. And she basically came to me, I thought, because she needed me to write some samples and sell the concept to her editors, her editorial board rather.
Hmm.
And I wrote the samples, I sent it in, and the project got approved, and they sent the contract over to me. And I read it, and it said, "You are responsible for writing all, 50,000 words of this book." And it was like, hold on, I did not think I was signing up for that much work. Like, I don't know that I can do this. I just went full time on this job. And um, my editor was like, hey, you can take this contract, take the advance, and if you don't touch it, and you can't finish the book or whatever, you just give it back. No harm, no foul. It doesn't matter. But since you're full time on this and whatnot, why not try it? Uh, so I did. I wrote the book. I managed to hit that deadline. I was kind of blown away that I could even do that, and kind of thankful that it was coming from a publishing company like providing me the concept, and this wasn't something that like I was emotionally invested in or whatever. It's just like I'm doing this as like an interesting challenge or whatnot. And so they published the book that I wrote, and it ended up selling really, really well, like surprisingly well for really everybody who was involved with the project. And so I kept working with them, and that became the missing piece of my income. That became the thing that could supplement the money that I was making from one shot, and it has since grown to be like my primary source of income. I don't really make money from one shot these days, as times are harder than they used to be. I think for the people who support our projects, but I do still write, 1 to 2 publishing projects a year, and that keeps me afloat for the most part. So, yeah, it was like an odd transition. Most people, I think, when they go into publishing, like they have to want to go into publishing, and there is like a long period of pitching and figuring out if you can do something. I am in a very strange and unique position where the publisher approached me, and specifically with it being a traditional publisher too. Like, what this wasn't a hobby role playing game publisher. The scale and distribution of these books was totally different. It also dramatically affects the kind of things that they can make.
Mm.
But at the end of the day, it, means new and different opportunities for role playing. I make all these strange accessory books. Like they're not games themselves. They're things that you would get if you play games and could, enhance your experience with those. It's been a fun and interesting challenge. And I think has resulted in trying to make products that like I haven't seen out there. Like I'd seen a lot of different things that are like, 100 tables or whatever that you can roll on to
Mhm.
add to your character's backstory or whatnot. But when I received like the concept of that book, I was like, I really want to see how people can approach this from a lot of different angles and what in character creation or background generation like could be useful that we're not really seeing or taking advantage of in the industry. And so I tried to create that, and that ended up, being successful and popular.
How was the process? Because it for me, when you are reading the book, there is a lot of books like with ideas and exercises, but when you're reading the book, it's not like I vomit like 100 exercises. It's like you have l- um, you have a certain ingredients, and you are
Mhm.
like, okay, this exercise is for this ingredient. Is like it's very mm, I don't know. It's very clever. It's very uh,
Yeah, it was it was
I don't know how to say it, but
it was an interesting process for sure. Part of it was the first book was very experimental. Like
Mhm.
there wasn't a template to working off of. I hadn't done one of these books before. Um, and I think if you look at the first character backstory guide and you compare it to even the world building guide that you did, you can see that the world building guide is a lot more firmly built around the idea of exercises are these useful tools where there are a lot of useful tools in the character backstory guide, and there are a lot of things that are just activities to do that are less focused and incisive. Mainly because I was experimenting. I didn't know what this publisher wanted. The publisher didn't know what our audience wanted. And so we were just throwing a bunch of ideas at the wall. The main thing was trying to hit 100 different ideas. And when I got to do the second book in that format, the world building guide, it was much more clear of like, I think I know how people are using this book, and I can now design to that. As to what I was aiming to do, there is a idea of what is expression, what is like a piece of art versus a piece of design. And the idea that divides these, that I heard that I really like is when you're creating art, you are engaging in expression. Like when you
Mhm.
write a story, when you write something, you are just putting ideas out there. And when you engage in design, you're creating a space for people to do their own expression. Um, and I think a lot of what I had seen up to that point with character backstory books and the design behind them was I'm going to create tiny pieces of expression that people can mix into what they're making and come out the other end with something interesting, which is why a lot of those books are, well, this is a random trait that you can roll for your character or a random item that you can roll that your character has on them. And that might spark an idea for the player of, oh, if I have this trait, then I've probably done this. It does provide something for you to build your backstory. But the experience that I had, especially with like the indie games that I was reading at the time, is there is a way to present people with like information and questions about it that really opens up their imagination, that provides them a rich pathway to their own ideas. And that's the support of good design in my mind is creating a structure that makes doing something creative that people might find daunting or difficult to actually be easy and fun. So all of the exercises in these books break down the process of making some kind of concept for a world or character into a few easy steps, and then providing you with questions or activities to expand upon those like few decisions that you made early on and make them into something much larger, that easily connects to ideas that you have already created for your character. So it is, looking at things like Powered by the Apocalypse RPGs and
Mhm.
what they have done with their like little pick lists, where you choose a few traits and you mix those traits together, and that creates like a unique and exciting idea that feels wholly yours. Or taking game components that are matching questions to each other so that the combination of ideas that you end up with is like something that if you put it in front of 100 different people, you would see 100 different ideas. I really just want to create smaller structures that are very easy for people to begin and put them in a position where all of a sudden their creative ideas are coming to the fore because they've received just enough input or been given just enough restrictions that the choice paralysis disappears and they're able to focus on one good idea that they're excited about. And, there are so many different exercise types and whatnot across my various books because I am trying to, give every person five different angles into that space, five different jumping off points that might be useful to people. And like some of those exercises, you'll open that book and go, well, this isn't relevant to me or any character that I've made. And that's fine because, there are at least 10 good ones in
Yes.
there. And the ones that you don't like are tailor made for somebody else. So that's kind of what I'm trying to do. I'm just trying to create these like microcosms of engineering that give people easy things to do that all of a sudden make creativity so much easier and so much more rewarding. Partially because it is an interactive activity. That book is still giving you input and you're not doing whatever you're trying to do alone.
Based on you and I assume you had a lot of feedback from readers. So based on that feedback, what do you think is these books is more useful for new players, for experienced player, or to professional players? What do you think?
It is kind of all over the place. I will say that there are plenty of people that I have seen in reviews and whatnot who are like, this style of book just does not work for them. And that is totally fine. There are a lot of people who are like, what I wanted was random tables. And that's cool because I know that person has like a dozen different random table books that they can
Yes.
benefit from. There are plenty of people who have had a lot of experience who have said, like, this is a new way of developing ideas, and I appreciate that. There are plenty of new players who are like, this has been a good entry point into for me into the world of role playing and getting more ideas out of it. A lot of what I am doing in these books, because the first one, the character backstory guide, is very much a fantasy forward book. And it was a tool that I made for people who primarily play games like Dungeons and Dragons to benefit from some of the design tools that I have learned in playing indie games. Because one thing that I found making a career of playing as many games as possible, the more games I have played, the better I have become as a player and a game master because I have seen the ways mechanics incentivize or make certain things easier and support me when I'm making creative decisions as a player or a game master. And if you only play one game, there's a lot you're missing out on because there's a lot that just simply isn't included in the toolbox that's given to you when you get a game manual for Dungeons and Dragons. So when I put this together, it's like there are a lot of cool mechanical tools that I've mixed in here that now you can benefit from, including like there are several like mini games, kind of sub RPGs that you can play alongside a traditional system that will support a narrative and help you have a more fulfilling narrative experience through those. So, like, who can benefit? It's like somebody who is really open to new ways of exploring their ideas, new ways of engaging with mechanics as part of the game. And that can be new players, that can be experienced players. Now, when we move over to the gameplay guide, which is more explicitly advice and things that I have learned in a performance based space for role playing. I really try to emphasize that what I'm doing in that is trying to break down my style and approach to play because I think there is a lot of value in understanding and experiencing different styles of play. When I was learning game mastering, like back in college, I
Mhm.
played with a bunch of different GMs and
Yes.
our club had kind of put together a curriculum sort of for new players to during my sophomore year. uh there was a new player campaign where a group got to make a group of like, you know, 5 characters or whatever, and there would be 5 different sessions with 5 different GMs from that club.
Oh.
And by the end, they would have experienced a lot of different approaches to how
But that,
you
that was
run.
like something like the club was
Yeah, that's just something the club put together. And like
that's amazing. I don't know.
it's really like it's a great
Yes.
idea, like truly,
Yes.
truly a great idea. And I liked it because the, you know, playing with all those different people, like I completely understood that, yeah, there is no one experience of role playing, even though it's all the same game. Just having that different element of a different game master, or even having different players around you,
Mhm.
changes the experience so much. And it's not everybody can go to a club that is wonderful like that. That's like, hey, we've got 5 different people to run the same game in different ways for you to start figuring some of these things out. That's like kind of a miraculous lightning in a bottle thing. And through watching actual play, you can also absorb some of
Mhm.
other people's play styles and whatnot. So I felt like there's a lot of value in just I'm going to try and break down what I'm doing, the way I approach it, and the way I think about it. Because if you understand those things, you will be able to take what is useful to you in honing and developing your approach, and you know, leave everything else as like, well, I don't really like the way James approaches plot or character, but his, you know, advice on pacing a game really makes sense to me or whatever. Like I just wanted to put as much information in front of people as possible so they could walk away not just understanding how I do things, but perhaps by agreeing or disagreeing with me, walk away with a better understanding of how they do things. The more intentionally you can engage with what you're doing at the table, the more you try to do the fun things that like your fellow players and yourself enjoy on purpose, the more successful and creative you can be with it.
My club in college was like the cafeteria. You were there and someone was playing. So that was all my club was something like that. Like you have tables and the chairs. So that's your club, and that's it's blow minding for me. It's amazing, and I'm just like imagine how was if I had that in the university, I think that could be a lot different for me. It's very very cool. When you are using all that tips or exercises, there is like certain ingredients. You now talk about a few of them, like plot, pacing, and how did you have like a list mm, before you start writing, or you have to think about it and you change it along the construction of the book, or how was that?
That I had to outline. Like I had to basically because with the gameplay guide, they really wanted like an instructive manual for how to do things. And there is so much that goes into GMing. There are so many different things someone can engage with and do. And the same thing with playing. There's so much that affects your experience at that table. I really struggled to like break down and explain any of it, you know. It's like, well, I have so much to tell you that I don't even know where to start. And I tried to focus on the fact that my real strength and experience and style comes from the fact that I had done all of this improv training and that I was applying my techniques from improv and my sense of narrative that I got to develop when I was at this wonderful club in college, and was like, okay, what I like about games and what I think I am best at is providing these fulfilling narrative experiences and using the game systems to my advantage in creating and keeping those narratives together. So I really tried to break down. I think the way you phrased it is very good. Like, what are the different ingredients at the table? You know, um, if we are to compare it to cooking, there's that wonderful cooking guide of salt, fat, heat, and salt, fat, heat, and acid. That just kind of breaks down the
That was like a Netflix movie about that, or
yeah,
documentary, I think.
there's a
This.
Netflix thing and it is based
Mhm.
on a modern cooking manual that just
Mhm.
sort of breaking down like these are the different things that affect the flavors when you cook something. The amount of salt that is present on a piece of meat when you put it on the grill, when you apply heat to it, will chemically affect that meat's like journey through that cooking to like if you don't salt a piece of meat and you do salt a piece of meat, or if you salt right at the end, all of that will end up with a different cut of steak, a different experience of that food. And so trying to break down what are the narrative elements of the game, what is the salt, fat, and heat of role playing. I, tried to come up with these elements. And here's the thing I'll say. I don't know how successful I was in that. I do know like eventually I wrote my game master's guide after the gameplay guide that was more focused on the game master's experience, and I revisited some of these ideas and sharpened them a little bit more. Um, I think at the end of the day, I've got some ideas in there. I've broken down things in a way that, like, you are not paralyzed by how vast and expansive this art form is. You can actually narrow things down to a few ideas that you can approach with intention and work on and create ways for you to judge how you are improving. And if all I did is put enough ideas out there that allow people to develop their own, like that is a success in my book. Because, when we think about something like performance or acting, that has, you know, decades upon decades of academic structure for how you teach someone how to perform, how you
Mhm.
teach someone to use their body as an instrument. And the art form of role playing games is very young. Um, People have treated it as something that you wouldn't want to intentionally hone or craft because it's like something that you do for fun. But, now we're in an era where we recognize like not only do we do this for fun, but part of the fun is approaching it as a craft. And there is a desire and fulfillment to that you get when you do it better. when I run a campaign that feels like a really satisfying narrative experience, that feels like a compelling thing when everybody is at that table engaging in the story together. And because this is in its infancy, people like me are taking shots in the dark when we try to put together guides of how to
Mm.
do things and whatnot. I do think there's value in it, but I'll also say, like, I'm not 100% right. And I know for a fact people who buy that, readers who buy this new translated version are going to read it, and even if they disagree with me, even if they think I am absolutely wrong in some of the things that I'm saying, that is going to help them firmly establish what their own perspective is.
Mhm.
And that way, even in failing, quote unquote, I get to be successful in some way, which is a sneaky design choice that I've made. Um, but truly, because it's in its infancy, like, we're at a time where the people who are reading this book now are probably going to go out there and have a strong voice in how they decide things are done, and may form a lot of what we look at as a curriculum for understanding or developing this thing as we go. And that's very exciting to me. And that's, again, one of the reasons that I'm so glad to see this translated, because there's absolutely no way all of the exciting ideas about this exist in America, right? Like, it can't just be in English speaking spaces. Having access to an exchange of these ideas, reaching different languages, the more minds we reach with this, the more exciting like energy and thought gets poured into this. And we walk away with like a richer community and a richer hobby, a richer art form.
This I want to have a hat so I can put my hat off because I totally agree with everything you have said. There is something you have said that all your improv training has helped you in the writing of these books. But there is a problem with the improv technique that it's based on a certain structures of films on novels that it's not exactly the same when you are approaching a actor play.
Mhm.
So for me, and I was talking with a friend about this, a friend with it's very into the improve community, and they are agree with me that you can't just translate it. You can't take a improve book and read it and use it on a game an role playing game. So how do you approach the translation from improv to game mastering?
Yeah, I think that is a salient observation. You certainly can't pick up guides like Truth in Comedy, the one that Del Close did through IO, um, and apply all of that one to one
Mm.
with role playing. And part of that is some of what is happening in improv it views itself as disposable in a certain way. That's kind of how some of it works, is that you are putting ideas out there and they exist in that moment, and then they disappear, and it's very ephemeral. You can watch an improv show here in Chicago at the IO Theater, and see some terrifically talented people put something together like night after night and have a really transcendent experience, but they won't remember what they did 3 nights ago because it's impossible to keep all of that with them all of the time. Improv is in essence, a lot of what we're doing at a role-playing table, at the end of the day, we're engaging in a shared, spontaneous narrative. And in improv, what they want to do is make that shared, spontaneous narrative for an audience. So they've engineered a lot of their lessons to how do we take people, performers, like comedians, what have you, how do we take those people and provide them with a structure that will help them successfully create shared narratives night after night? And part of that just depends on like this ephemeral quality to it. Like it is going to go away. But the foundational basis of that is, in order to do this thing, in order for the wheels not to come off, everybody on that stage, part of that production, has to be engaged and invested in supporting whatever is happening. Even if what is happening is an unfolding disaster, you're not going to fix it by denying it or destroying it. You're going to fix it by piling onto that foundation and building it up. And the essence of that is relevant to what we're doing at role playing because we are all building something together. And the technique or approach of accepting and embracing and empowering what the people around you are doing does translate one to one. If you support the ideas of everybody else at that table, just like an improviser might support the ideas of everybody on stage, it sets you up. It doesn't guarantee you success, but it sets you up for success in what you are trying to do. So a lot of what I was trying to take from improv is like, what are these like core foundational mechanics built into improv? And there are certain things like that role playing does, like automatically that improv has to work very hard to get to. One of those things is like accepting a core premise. In improv, like everybody's trying to guess at what a core premise for a scene is like when they walk out on stage. Like you walk out on stage, you make eye contact with somebody, that person says a thing, and you respond to that thing they say. Now, you figure out what that scene is as you're doing it. But in role-playing games, we don't have to worry about that because everybody's got a character sheet. Every like the book has like a premise is like, we are all adventurers. I am this type of adventurer that fills this role, and we all want to like fight a monster and get some gold. Like, so a lot of those questions are not relevant to that conversation. However, like how as a game master, I support a player who is an elf in like being that elf, you can learn a lot from the improv technique of like, as I say in my books, treating their ideas as important. If somebody says something about their experience or their character's experience of being an elf, if that is represented in the world, if that helps create moments that are interesting and intriguing in the game, the player feels rewarded for contributing that idea. So those little things, those little components, taking that and putting in a form where we can, as role players, really benefit the most without having to go through years and years of improv training to pick up those techniques is like part of what I was driving at. I do think if you do improv training, you will be able to take that back to your role-playing tables, and you will find that you can make experiences that are more rewarding, or maybe approach moments with more confidence, what have you. But you and your friend, I would say, are absolutely right. It is not one to one, and it is very much the benefit that you get when you play a different game system and then go back to your favorite game system and maybe apply some of the lessons that you have learned from that experience to your play. You don't just get all the answers. You get tools and techniques that suddenly come at your disposal and come to hand. And part of the gameplay guide was really trying to distill out a few of those into a useful and understandable form for people.
Um, when you are game mastering or playing, I don't care. Do you approach it differently when you are on your table with your I don't care if there is friends or in a convention or whatever, or do you approach the same this type of game mastering as when you are recording it? Because for
Uh,
me it's very difficult, it's very different because the audience is not the players, the audience is the people that is watching it. Do you approach it differently?
I would say at this point in my like career, the style between playing with me in like an unobserved private game and playing with me on a podcast or on a stream or at a convention, what have you, there's very, very little difference in the style. The only thing I think these days that I would say, yes, there is a difference in how I approach things is now when I am doing recorded games, I notably take less time in contemplation for ideas, weighing out possibilities. I make a decision and just support that decision because I don't want to waste my editor's time having to cut out ideas that we're not going to use. And if I'm like doing it on a stream, I don't want to waste the audience's time. I don't want to waste anybody who like showed up to my table at a convention's time. Like I'm doing it as a performance, and part of the performance is
Mhm.
just making a decision and moving forward. I do have a show on our network now that started as a home game for all of like my spouse and our neighbors upstairs, Drew and Allie. Um, and we just played together and like we recorded it because we happen to have recording equipment in the house, but we were like playing it more for fun. And there's a lot more contemplation, a lot more taking a break to do some world building or whatnot. That has now it is a performance thing. Like people can listen to that audio and you can kind of see how that style of play is different than typically what I do. But these days, yeah, on mic and off mic, it's the same for me because honestly, doing a narrative and performance oriented style of play is kind of my preferred mode. A lot of these days, like if I play a private game, I kind of regret whenever it's not recorded because I like having that document of what we did. I like being able to preserve that experience in some way. And also, selfishly, I think it elevates the level of play of everybody else at the table too. Um, Partially because you cannot understand someone when two people are talking on a mic at the same time. Like it never translates into usable audio. So people actually have to stop and listen to one another before responding, which I think just sort of like passively elevates what everybody else is doing.
I think this question, I think you already answered it, but I want to do it again. Uh, do you think for me that is important that for some people role playing game is a hobby, and for some people role playing games it's a job.
Mhm.
And now with the social networks and all this, the the um, the wall between these two walls is like foggy. It's like you don't know when you are doing some exercise and you are putting a lot of stress in your hobby, and you are going to stop enjoying it because you are treating it like a job, and you
Mm.
don't know when your job is crappy because you are treating it as a hobby. And it's very difficult for me, and this type of books for me is like controversial in that sense. Like, I don't know if this is good for someone that is going to be just a hobby, and these people don't want it to be a job. So what do you think about this? Is for you it's important for the two work? You are agree with this, or how do you think?
So yeah, I definitely say it's a foggy space. And one quote that I think I will remember forever, on Twitter, at one point, there was somebody complaining about the new Doom video game and how they had put in a weapon that he doesn't like, and said, like, can there be a way that we don't have to use this weapon in the game, or whatever? And the developer responded to that comment with, "You are in control of the buttons you push." So at the end of the day, I think that yes, we have seen this as like a very frivolous hobby in the past, and we are now looking at it in slightly different ways due to the context of the new places we can engage with it. People are doing this as performance. There is more awareness of how game design interacts with the experience at the table, simply because we can hear from designers more often. And there are people who just want to sit down, roll dice, and not think about the decisions that they're making, or whatever they're doing at the table, because for them, that's the experience of role playing. And that is always going to be around. However, there are also people who not only are going to love doing this as a hobby thing, but they're going to get some of that hobby fulfillment out of trying to do more with it, getting ambitious with it. At the end of the day, it's all exploration and expression. And expression is a thing that you can hone. Somebody can play a musical instrument, and they can play it just for fun, just to make sounds that they enjoy. They can also play it as part of a band, to have fun, and they can play it as part of a band to make money. If you play football, you might just head out to the field and kick with your friends, but you might have more fun with the game if you spend a little bit of time to kick more effectively, to be able to bend those shots at the goal and get them in more consistently, or work on your footwork so it is harder to tackle and steal from you. There's all kinds of things that you can do that, yes, do introduce more effort and intention to your hobby, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it drains and steals fulfillment from it. In fact, for many people, it will add to that fulfillment. Now, if I were to play football with somebody who has put in a lot of effort in honing their craft and skills, I probably might have less fun playing with that person because they would completely destroy me. I'd never get a foot on a ball. Every kick would be embarrassing because I'm not very good at that game. Uh, but we can exist in the same space. Just because somebody like that exists who is good at football does not mean I can't go out and also kick a ball around a field with my friends. Both of those things can exist simultaneously. And I do think there are some people who really want to experience this hobby as something that they aren't terribly invested in the form of craft, in the form of artistic expression, what have you. They're seeing more people come into the space who do want to engage in it as artistic expression and craft, and matching up those things. There are different expectations for what the table is going to be like, and those are kind of clashing. So I understand people say when they say like, oh, it's taking enjoyment from the game, or even people who do genuinely enjoy focusing on role play as a craft, but they start down a professional path and all of a sudden, well, you're not just role playing, you're scheduling, you're learning streaming tools, you're like trying to engage with an audience, and it adds a bunch of like work to it that is not purely the expression. That might be stealing some of your enjoyment from the process or what have you, but you're in control of the buttons you push. If you feel like it is more effort that detracts from your experience to approach this as an art form that you can hone and improve on, then you don't have to do that. You can simply find tables full of other people who are interested in just rolling the dice and not thinking too hard about that. Uh, if you really like the artistry and the expression of it, if you want to hone your techniques, but don't want to take that into a performative professional space, you're also in control of whether or not you do that. Uh, the problems that I think people end up having with each other break down to communication and expectation, where you got to talk about what everybody wants out of the game before you decide to play together. Because if one person is like, yeah, I really want to spend a lot of time doing in character dialogue and like developing the intrigue of a story, and the other person is like, I'm just here for combat and doing tactical combat stuff and rolling dice, those play styles might not work, or they might have to stretch and flex to accommodate each other. And thankfully, that is something in the gameplay guide that I've talked about, is like how you set expectations, how you harmonize those expectations a little bit, because I think role playing, like I said, is so expansive. It can mean so many things. And you really need to align that to have a good experience. But I think approaching this like from a sense of purity, of we can somehow prevent or protect what we're doing by preventing other people from having their style of fun, is silly and stupid. And like, no, you're not. I can't, as much as I wouldn't want to be at a table with somebody who only wants to roll dice and doesn't want to do character stuff, I can't stop them from having that fun. We probably just shouldn't be at the same table together. Or if we are, I have to recognize where my moments are, and they have to recognize where their moments are. And we have to be happy coexisting with that. And if you can't do that, there is a problem with your philosophy.
Okay, we are starting the last segment now because it's you are you are very busy and I don't want to steal a lot of money for you, time from you. So, how many books are in this book series? Because you are have written four. Did I agree?
I think I've written five. I actually have to turn to the internet now.
Because it's like you had like I'm going to do seven and I'm going to stop, or you are approaching every book at a time.
Basically, I send off pitches to my publisher and they decide the ones that they want to accept. Okay. Yeah. So I have written five in this series. I edited the micro RPG book.
Ah, okay.
And there are like two card accessory products that I've done, and one actual role-playing game that I've created for them. Um, so yeah, I definitely got confused on that, especially because for the micro book, I wrote a lot of like introduction and accessory material for it. But yeah, there are five in this series, and basically what happens next is always dependent on what the editorial board and my publishers think the market wants to see at that moment. I know when I pitched the Game Master's Guide, I had also pitched the character backstory, like sequel guide too, at the same time, and they wanted the world building guide first, so that's what we did. It really it depends on the whims of the editorial board as to what comes out, and like honestly, I depend on it for a job. So if Simon and Schuster comes to me and they're like, "Hey, we need another backstory guy," and I'll go, "Okay, I'll figure out how to do that." And
Okay.
yeah.
And the these decks, because there is the campfire card deck, and
Mhm.
that's a brilliant idea. I don't know how was that? How was that process?
That was such an interesting thing because I designed that accessory because I was trying to sell them "Oh Captain, My Captain." "Oh Captain, My Captain" is a descended from the Queen card-based RPG,
Okay.
and I took that to them, and they're like, "This is too weird. This is too many things that we, as your publisher, are unfamiliar with. This is, first of all, a role-playing game, which we sell role-playing game accessories. We're not sure we can sell a game itself." And this is cards, and we don't do cards. So I was like, okay, let me pitch you an accessory that uses cards, and we can see how that does. And if it's successful, let's maybe revisit the game. And thankfully, they were open to that path. And honestly, the reason that I did the campfire card deck is at the time, my spouse and I had just had our child, and we're brand new parents, absolutely fried and frazzled at the end of every day, and like we're trying to exist as humans while also taking care of an infant. And one of the things that we found is like we wanted to like talk to each other, but we didn't know what to say because like we were too sleep deprived and tired to think of things. And so my therapist was like, there are these conversation starting decks that you can try.
Mhm.
And you know, they've got questions and whatnot to prompt conversations. And people, you know, will bring them out in couples for situations like this where you can't think about what to start, or for first dates, or for icebreakers at parties and whatnot. And I got a bunch of these things because I looked at them as a game design product. I'm like, this is a game. Like at the end of the day, like they might just say like these are, you know, card prompts or whatever, but like somebody has put these specific questions into it to create an experience. This is a game. And I found the design on them to be not that wonderful because a lot of the prompts like went into spaces that I'm like, this is, it doesn't matter what the couple is. This is going to start a fight. Why is this here? You know? Um, but looking at that, I was like, in role playing, it doesn't matter what the prompt creates. As long as the prompt creates something, that is a successful experience. So if you do something that causes two characters to get in a fight, you have prompted some energy and passion from those players, which is success at the end of the day. It is given them a new context to be their characters and have fun portraying those characters. So I put together the campfire deck because it's a new way to get players' ideas out there, to start those conversations, to help them inhabit their characters more. And I know as a player, sometimes I come to the table with a backstory for my character, and there's almost never an opportunity to bring that up unless I'm working with a really good GM who is going to incorporate it into the story. I don't know, you know, there are a lot of players who don't know like how to get a word in edgewise around this. And the campfire deck is like an excuse to get a lot of that information out there. So, you know, it came from like this real world product that people use, and me going, I'll bet I can use this to adapt to fictional scenarios. If we just treat these characters like people, then they will thrive like people when we present them with different ways to start conversations. Um, so yeah, I was very excited about the structure of that because it allows people to do that again in the way that is easy and fun, which is the purpose of design.
Okay, the last question. I'm going to in the chat. I already put an URL for you to see. This is Dracula Dossier. I know
Oh,
you
yes.
know Dracula Dossier, but this is our version of Dracula Dossier because when we published it in Spanish, we made a box set with all the books inside of it, and I'm in love with this product.
It is gorgeous.
It's
Yeah.
gorgeous. It's amazing.
Dracula Dossier is just for listeners at home, one of my favorite like adventure supplements of all time. It is such a clever like implementation. For those that don't know, it is literally taking the novel Dracula and annotating it with notes from like spies, essentially, that ties into like campaign prompts and adventures that you get to do with your party. So like literally you can read Dracula and get new and exciting information. One of the things that Ken Hite, the designer of this, did is actually look at unused sections of Bram Stoker's original like manuscript and put those into. So this version of Dracula is probably slightly different than any classic version that you've read. And it actually is the same document that your character would be reading in the game, and it ties into all of these wonderful like pre-prepared adventure moments, and your group gets to decide what prompts they want to act on. It's so cool. So the fact that y'all have brought this to another language is wildly impressive, because even just as an English document, I know it took a lot of work. So I cannot imagine how difficult it was on the translation side. But,
Yes.
the link that you've shown me is absolutely gorgeous.
Marta, our editor, I think she is still crying because all this that there's like 4,000 cross reference between the books, and it was a really nightmare for her for to put it all together, and it's impressive. And my question is, I know you play that with Kenneth Hyde,
Mhm.
so how was that? That's the question. How was that?
Such a fun experience. I mean, Ken is like a, brilliant designer, but also like a very charismatic and gregarious like person, and exactly the type of person that you want to have running your table. And I think really speaks to the power that expertise has when you sit down to do a role playing scenario, because Ken, as a hobby, spends a lot of time reading about and studying tradecraft for espionage and whatnot. And that's all sewn into the game. Like there's a lot that just by reading uh what is it, Night's Black Agents,
Mhm.
you get the benefit of Ken's expertise. But I felt like every decision at the table that we made was like so wonderfully supported by Ken. And he like, being such a font of knowledge for like interesting trivia, and the way he took that and sewed it into our adventure was just so much fun. I highly recommend anybody listening, if you have a chance to like play with Ken at a convention, like jump at it, because it's a really wonderful experience. And Ken, I'm so happy to say, is a dear friend of mine, lives in Chicago like I do.
Mhm.
We don't get to see each other nearly as much as I would like. But yeah, it was such a cool experience that I wouldn't trade for the world.
So I don't know if you want to say anything else, but I think that's a wrap. I don't know.
Well, I will say, on my various publishing endeavors, the latest one is Oh Captain, My Captain. So if you happen to be bilingual and you're not opposed to an English language game, Oh Captain, My Captain is a very simple game, takes 10 minutes to learn. You can play a full session in an hour. Like it is a great tool for introducing people to role playing, that you can find just about wherever books are sold. If you go to this Adams Media Simon and Schuster website, there's a link for all the various online retailers there. I'm really hoping that is a big success because I want my publisher to publish more role playing games. You can also check out my actual play podcasts, which are in English. But again, if you are bilingual and enjoying this interview, then you might be able to benefit from those. Campaign Skyjacks is my big tentpole show. It is a folktale punk series about sky pirates inspired by the music of the Decemberists. And I know that's a very specific pitch, but there's a lot of cool stuff that shows up in that campaign, that I think your listeners might appreciate if they like actual play. So definitely check that out. And also you can check out Star Wall, our space fantasy campaign, using the same system as Skyjacks. And like I said, the original theory is like much more a home game, so you can see the difference between those two play styles and presentation and whatnot. But I cannot thank folks enough for listening along, and I cannot thank you enough for having me on this wonderful show and having this conversation with me. It was so nice.
I want to make like a pitch for your pitch, and I'm giving you another URL about one of our upcoming games. What is called
Ooh.
Eternal Blue is Sky Pirate. It's a game
Oh,
about
very
Sky
cool.
Pirates. So I want you to. I think you are going to enjoy it when it's going out. We're going to put it in English and in Spanish at the same time because we want you to play it sometime.
Oh, wonderful. Yeah, absolutely.
So we're going to talk with you in a in the future when this is going to start because I think this is your shit. It's like this is tailored for you, and I only want you to know this is going to happen.
Oh, that's very exciting. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for telling me.
No. Thanks you for coming here to this show. I really enjoyed that conversation, and I think that's everything. If you are not you are watching this with the YouTube subtitles, sadulans.es/guía definitiva rol, entras y te descarga y te compra los libros que ha escrito este señor, que son una auténtica maravilla. I was talking very good things about you, so don't worry. So James, thank you very much, and we are ending this. So bye, and thank you again.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye.